The video began with static. For a moment, nothing could be seen except a flickering gray screen and the faint buzz of interference. Then slowly, the picture cleared. A small apartment appeared. It was not extraordinary, only a simple place filled with ordinary furniture, but something about the scene immediately caught the attention of those watching. A young human officer, dressed in casual clothes, stood near the doorway. He seemed relaxed, as if it was just another day at home. Near him, moving silently with grace, was a tall alien maid. Her skin was faintly silver, her hair long and tied neatly behind her head. She carried a tray of dishes in her 4 slender hands, balancing them with ease. At first glance, she looked like someone quietly serving her master, but her glowing eyes gave away something deeper: alertness, intelligence, and perhaps secrets unknown. The recording appeared ordinary, but the title stamped across the video made it strange. Watch before deleted. No one knew where the video had come from. It spread across human networks like wildfire, shared from one device to another, discussed in forums, whispered about in secret channels. Some claimed it was fake, others insisted it was real, proof of the first alien cohabitation program. But all agreed on one thing: the video carried a heavy sense of unease, as though something terrible was about to happen. Inside the apartment, the officer spoke. His voice was calm. "You don't have to clean everything so fast," he said, smiling a little. "We're not on duty here." The alien maid turned her head slightly. Her glowing eyes blinked, and then she gave a small bow. "It is my duty to serve," she said in a soft voice. Her words were accented but clear. The officer laughed gently. "You're not just here for that," he said. "The treaty wouldn't send someone like you only to wash dishes." The camera shook a little. It seemed someone, or something, was holding it in secret, filming without the knowledge of those inside. That only added to the mystery. Who was recording? Why was the video being shared? As the maid placed the tray down on the table, a faint sound echoed through the apartment. A low hum, like distant thunder. The officer paused, frowning. The maid froze, her glowing eyes narrowing. "You hear that?" the officer asked. "Yes," she said. "It is not from this building." The camera zoomed slightly toward the window. Outside, the city looked normal at first. Tall towers, flying vehicles moving in the sky, the golden light of the evening sun reflecting on glass walls. But then, the hum grew louder. A shadow passed over the skyline. People on the streets below stopped walking. They looked upward. The maid stepped quickly to the window. Her silver skin shimmered faintly as she moved. Her voice was sharp now, no longer soft. "Stay back," she warned. The officer joined her, standing just behind. Together, they stared into the sky. From the clouds, shapes emerged. At first, they seemed like storm clouds breaking apart. But then, lights began to flash within them. One by one, enormous ships pushed through the atmosphere. They were dark, jagged, and unlike anything humans had ever built. Their forms were unnatural, almost insect-like, with sharp limbs stretching outward and glowing engines burning with a green fire. The hum turned into a roar. Windows shook. Car alarms on the street began to wail. The officer's hand instinctively went to his belt, though he wore no weapon at home. His training told him something was wrong, something dangerous. He looked at the maid, and for the first time he noticed her posture was different. She was no longer acting like a quiet servant. Her stance was tense, ready, like a soldier waiting for orders. "Who are they?" he whispered. The maid's glowing eyes did not blink. "Invaders," she said. The video crackled with static again, as if whatever recorded it was struggling to keep up with the energy waves now flooding the city, but the image quickly returned. On the streets below, panic began. People screamed, pointing to the sky. Vehicles collided as drivers lost control. Some ran, while others stood frozen, unable to understand what was happening. The first alien warship opened fire. A bright beam of light shot downward, striking a tower in the distance. The building erupted in flames, shattering into pieces that fell like burning rain. The shockwave rattled every window in the city. People screamed louder now, running in every direction. The officer pulled the Maid back from the glass as shards cracked loose from the window frame. The recording shook violently. "Who are they?" he demanded again, louder this time. The Maid looked at him, her glowing eyes fierce. "Not my people," she said quickly. "They are enemies to both your world and mine." The officer stared, stunned. "Then why are you here? Why were you sent?" The Maid hesitated. For the first time, her calm expression broke. Her silver skin shimmered, and her hands trembled slightly as she reached beneath her apron. To the officer's shock, she pulled out a small device, sleek, metallic, and glowing with blue light. "I was sent to protect," she said firmly. Before the officer could ask more, another blast shook the city. This one was closer. The apartment lights flickered. The hum of the alien ships grew like a monstrous heartbeat, echoing in every corner of the building. The camera view shifted suddenly, as though the unknown recorder was ducking for cover. Static filled half the screen. Voices could still be heard, though, sharp and clear. The officer's voice, "Protect from what?" The Maid's reply, "From them." The video ended there, cutting to black. But those who watched it would never forget the final words that appeared across the screen in white letters. The invasion of Earth spread faster than anyone had believed possible. What began as a strange hum above one city soon turned into chaos across continents. The Krivac ships descended like shadows, blotting out the sun in many places. Towers fell, streets burned, and entire power grids collapsed. But humanity was not unprepared. From orbit, Earth fleet picked up the signals of the first attacks. Commanders issued alerts within minutes. Every station, every base, every pilot was ordered to respond. Warships hidden in high orbit activated their systems, preparing for combat. Civilian broadcasts were interrupted by emergency messages. "Earth is under attack. Evacuate to shelters. Follow the guidance of local defense." Yet for those on the ground, the situation was desperate. The officer and the alien Maid ran through burning streets, their lungs filled with smoke. Around them, civilians scrambled for safety, some carrying the wounded, others crying out for lost family. Sirens wailed, and the sound of enemy fire roared above. The officer's training helped him stay calm. He guided people toward a half-collapsed subway entrance that still led underground. "Get inside," he shouted. "Stay low, stay together." His voice cut through the noise, giving them direction. The Maid fought beside him, her glowing armor shining in the smoke. Every time a Krivac soldier appeared, she struck them down with sharp precision. Her curved weapon hummed with power, cutting through enemy armor with ease. She moved like a shield around the officer, blocking attacks and covering their retreat. At last, when the civilians were safe, the officer turned to her. His face was streaked with ash, his eyes filled with determination. "We need to reach command. If they don't understand what's coming, Earth fleet will be slaughtered." The Maid nodded, her glowing eyes fierce. "Then we move quickly. The Krivac will not stop. Their goal is destruction." They moved through alleys and broken streets, avoiding open areas where enemy drones patrolled. The city, once bright and alive, now looked like a battlefield. Smoke rose in thick black columns. Fires spread across buildings. The sound of crying and shouting filled the air. As they moved, the officer noticed something: human soldiers fighting back. In the distance, squads of infantry armed with rifles and heavy launchers fired at the Krivac. Tanks rolled through broken roads, launching shells into the sky. Fighter jets screamed overhead, unleashing missiles at enemy ships. For the first time since the invasion began, hope flickered. Humanity was not giving up, but the Krivac were relentless. One by one, the jets were shot down by green beams. The tanks were crushed under falling debris from destroyed towers. The infantry fought bravely, but their weapons only slowed the enemy, not stopped them. The officer clenched his fists. He could feel the frustration building inside him. He had trained his entire life for war, but nothing had prepared him for this. The Krivac were too strong, too advanced. Without the right knowledge, humanity was fighting blind. That was when the Maid spoke. "There is still a chance," she said, her voice firm. "Your fleet has numbers, courage, and the will to survive. What they lack is understanding. That is why I was sent, to guide." The officer looked at her sharply. Then guide us. Tell me how to fight them." She paused, scanning the sky where the massive Krivak ships hovered like dark mountains. "Their shields are strong," she explained. "Your weapons cannot break them directly, but their shields consume great energy. If enough pressure is applied at once, they will overload. You must coordinate attacks, strike together in unison. Only then will the shields fail." The officer nodded slowly. He knew what she was saying was vital. If Command received this information, Earth's defenses might stand a chance, but reaching Command was not easy. The central base was on the far side of the city, and the Krivak were hunting. They pressed onward, moving through ruins and rubble. Twice they were ambushed by enemy patrols. Each time the Maid fought with skill, and the officer supported by helping civilians or using his training to outmaneuver the enemy. Though unarmed, he was clever, throwing debris to distract, leading enemies into ambushes, guiding people through safe paths. By the time they reached the outer edge of the city, the officer's clothes were torn and his face blackened with ash, but his resolve was unshaken. The Maid's armor was scratched, glowing less brightly, yet her movements remained sharp. At last they saw it, the rising walls of the command center. Unlike civilian buildings, it was reinforced with steel and energy shielding. Earth Fleet soldiers guarded the gates, weapons raised as refugees poured inside. The officer shouted, waving his arms. "Officer Hale, Earth Fleet," he called. "Open the gate." The soldiers recognized him. The gate slid aside and they rushed inside with the crowd. Inside, the base was alive with activity. Officers shouted orders. Screens flashed red with alerts. Maps of the city and orbit displayed enemy movements. The sound of engines hummed as ships prepared to launch. The officer and Maid were led straight to the war room. Commanders stood around a large table, their faces grim. Admiral Rains, a tall man with silver hair and a hard gaze, turned as they entered. "Hail," the admiral said. "We thought you were lost." The officer saluted quickly. "Sir, I bring intelligence. We cannot fight the Krivak blindly. We need to know how to break them." The commanders exchanged doubtful looks. "And where did you learn this?" one asked. The officer turned to the Maid. She stepped forward, her glowing eyes meeting the gaze of hardened officers without fear. Her armor shimmered faintly as she spoke. "I am not what I appeared to be," she said. "I am a guardian from my people. The Krivak are my enemy as much as yours. I was sent to watch and to protect. And now I bring knowledge." The room went silent. Some officers looked shocked, others suspicious. Aliens were known to humanity, but none had ever spoken so directly of Earth's fate. Admiral Rains narrowed his eyes. "What knowledge?" The Maid raised her weapon, showing its glowing core. "Their shields cannot be broken by single strikes. You must strike together all at once with every weapon you have. Overload their defenses and their ships will be vulnerable. If you fail to coordinate, you will fall one by one." The officers whispered among themselves. Some doubted her, but the admiral's expression was steady. He turned to Hale. "Do you trust her?" The officer did not hesitate. "With my life, sir. Without her, I would not be standing here." The admiral nodded slowly. "Then we prepare to strike." Around the table, new plans were drawn. Orders were sent across the network. Ships in orbit received the commands. Ground batteries adjusted their aim. Fighter squadrons regrouped. For the first time, humanity had a clear strategy. They would not scatter their fire. They would focus it, unleash it all at once, and tear through the enemy's shields. The officer stood beside the Maid, watching as humanity prepared for war. Despite the fear in the room, he felt something stirring deep inside him. A spark of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, they could stand against the darkness. Outside, the Krivak ships loomed, their green lights casting shadows across the burning city. Inside, humanity gathered its strength. The battle for Earth was only beginning. And somewhere in the chaos, the secret of the alien Maid was no longer hidden. It had become humanity's only chance to survive. The video that had spread so quickly across human networks ended in silence. People thought it was only a strange recording, maybe a hoax, maybe a warning, but what they didn't know was that the events inside that small apartment had only just begun. The officer, still staring at the alien Maid, could feel his heart pounding in his chest. The city outside was falling into chaos. The hum of the enemy ships grew louder, echoing through the walls like drums of war. Yet in the middle of all this, he could not take his eyes off the strange device glowing in her hands. "You said you were sent to protect," he said, his voice low but steady. "Protect from who? From them?" The maid's glowing eyes flashed brighter. Her calm, servant-like posture was gone. She no longer looked like someone meant to carry trays or clean dishes. Now she looked like a soldier who had waited a long time for this moment. Yes, she said. They are called the Krivak, a war empire that consumes worlds. My people have fought them for centuries. When the treaty with Earth was signed, I was placed here, to watch, to learn, and to guard. I hoped they would not come so soon. But they are here. The officer stared at her, struggling to process her words. Guard me? Why? I'm just one man. Why place you here in my home? The maid paused. Her silver skin seemed to ripple faintly as she took a breath. Because you are not just one man. You are an officer of Earth Fleet. You are someone who has the trust of your commanders. If the Krivak strike this city, you must survive. If you fall, Earth may never know how to fight back. Before the officer could answer, the building shook violently. The lights flickered and sparks burst from the ceiling. Screams echoed from the hallway outside as neighbors fled their apartments. Another blast roared through the city. The officer grabbed her arm. We can't stay here, he said. The building won't last another hit. The maid nodded once. Her glowing eyes dimmed as she focused, her grip tightening on the small blue device. She pressed it to her chest, and in a sudden flash, her simple servant clothes shimmered and dissolved, replaced by a sleek armored suit that wrapped around her body. The transformation was fast, smooth, and silent. The officer's eyes widened. She was no longer a maid. She looked like a warrior. The silver of her skin blended with the dark plates of her armor, and faint blue lines pulsed across it like veins of light. In her hands, the tray she had once carried was gone, replaced by a curved weapon that hummed with hidden energy. You've been hiding this? The officer asked, shocked. I had to, she said firmly. The treaty required it. I could not reveal my purpose unless the Krivak came, but now there is no choice. Before he could reply, the wall nearest the window cracked. With a thunderous crash, part of it collapsed inward. Dust and debris filled the room. Through the smoke, dark figures entered. They were Krivak soldiers. Their bodies were tall and jagged like the ships in the sky. Their armor was black and sharp-edged, and their limbs bent in unnatural ways. Glowing green lights pulsed from their helmets, casting eerie shadows across the room. Each carried a weapon that hissed with energy. The officer froze. He had never seen aliens like this before. Not in training, not in the treaty documents, not in any intelligence report. The sight of them was terrifying. The maid stepped in front of him, her weapon raised. Stay behind me, she ordered. The Krivak soldiers hissed in a strange language, their voices harsh like grinding metal. Then, without warning, they opened fire. Beams of green light shot across the room. The maid moved instantly, spinning her curved weapon in a blur. A shield of blue energy flared around her, blocking the blasts. The air shook with the clash of forces. She leapt forward, her movement swift and precise, striking with deadly accuracy. One soldier fell, then another, their bodies crashing against the broken wall. The officer could only watch, stunned. She moved like no soldier he had ever seen. Every strike was calculated, every defense perfect. She was not just a protector. She was a warrior trained for one purpose, to fight the Krivak. But there were more. Two soldiers slipped past her, aiming their weapons at the officer. He stumbled backward, his heart racing. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body froze. At the last moment, the maid turned, throwing her weapon like a spinning blade. It sliced through the air, knocking both soldiers aside. She caught the weapon as it returned to her hand, her glowing eyes fierce. You must move, she shouted. The officer nodded, finally breaking free of his shock. He rushed toward the door, the maid close behind. Together they pushed into the hallway. The air was filled with smoke and dust. Neighbors screamed as they ran, carrying children, clutching whatever belongings they could. Some lay injured on the floor, crying for help. The officer's training kicked in. Though unarmed, he moved quickly to assist. He helped lift a fallen child, guiding the family toward the stairwell. The maid covered them, blocking stray shots from the Krivak. As they moved downward, the officer asked breathlessly, Why Earth? Why now? The maid's voice was grim. Because your world is growing strong. Too strong. The Krivak fear humanity. They know what you can become. The words hit him harder than the blasts above. Fear humanity? He had always thought Earth was still weak compared to the great empires of the galaxy. But the maid spoke with certainty, as though she had known this truth all along. When they reached the ground floor, the building groaned. Cracks split the walls. The ceiling above them rumbled like thunder. The officer knew it was seconds from collapse. They burst outside into the streets. Chaos surrounded them. Fires burned in every direction. The sky was filled with dark ships, their green lights raining destruction. The air smelled of smoke and metal. People ran everywhere. Soldiers fired desperately at the invaders, but their weapons seemed too weak to make a difference. The maid turned to him, her glowing eyes burning brighter than ever. "You must reach your command," she said. "The fleet must know what they face." "They cannot fight blind," the officer nodded, his jaw tight. He understood now why she had been placed in his home, why she had hidden her true purpose. She was more than a servant. She was a guardian, sent to keep him alive at all costs. Together they ran into the burning streets. The camera, hidden somewhere nearby, caught only fragments of their escape. The maid's glowing armor flashing in the smoke, the officer pulling civilians to safety, the green light of enemy fire raining down from above. The video cut off once again, replaced by the same words as before, "Watch before deleted." But those who saw part 2 of the recording could feel it. This was no hoax. Humanity was no longer safe, and somewhere in the shadows of Earth the secret of the alien maid had been revealed. The calm before battle was a lie. From orbit, Earth fleet watched the city burn below, while Krivak ships hovered like predators above. But even as humanity prepared its first coordinated strike, the officer and the alien maid knew the war was far larger than anyone could imagine. Inside the command center, alarms rang without pause. Sensors detected movement in orbit, in deep space, and even through distant wormhole channels. The Krivak were not just attacking Earth. They were probing, mapping, and analyzing. Every action humanity made was being observed, studied, and countered. The alien maid, her armor still glowing faintly, walked to the main holographic display. She pointed to a series of signals the humans could barely see. "These are not just soldiers," she said. "They are scouts. But the real enemy is hidden beyond these layers. You see only their first wave. The ships above are only a fraction of their forces." The officer leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "How many are we talking about?" She shook her head. "Impossible to say. Their empire stretches across star systems. Their fleets are massive. What you see here is only the advance strike. If we cannot stop it, more will follow," the commanders whispered in shock. Some had believed the Krivak to be powerful, but the scale of their operation was beyond comprehension. Suddenly, a signal came in from a deep space sensor array. Strange readings, almost impossible to interpret. The ships were moving as if connected, their energy patterns synchronized. The officer looked at the maid. "What is that?" he asked. She grimaced. "A hive network. The Krivak share data through energy links. Every ship, every soldier is connected. That is why their attacks are so precise, and why they adapt so quickly." The officer's stomach tightened. He had seen their precision firsthand. Each strike, each ambush, it had seemed random, but now he understood it was coordinated intelligence. Admiral Rains, standing behind them, tapped his fingers on the table. "Then our plan must account for this. If they share information instantly, our attacks must hit simultaneously or it will fail." The maid nodded. "Yes, but there is more." She tapped her device and a 3D hologram of Earth appeared. Small red dots pulsed across the globe. The Krivak have placed energy nodes in orbit, on satellites, even underground. These nodes enhance their shield networks and transmit intelligence back to the main fleet. If we do not destroy them first, our coordinated strike will weaken before it begins. The officer's eyes widened. "So the attack on the city? It was only the beginning?" "Yes," she said. "They tested your defenses. They wanted to see how quickly humans react. They wanted to find weaknesses." A sudden blast shook the command center. Windows rattled. The base's outer shields held, but it was a reminder that the enemy was close. Krivak ships were moving in formation, preparing to strike again. The officer turned to the maid. "Then we need to find these nodes and take them out before the next wave." She nodded. "I know some locations. My sensors can detect energy signatures invisible to your technology, but it will be dangerous. I cannot move all at once. We must choose our targets carefully." Together they plotted a strategy. The maid pointed out 3 key nodes, 2 in orbit and 1 hidden on the dark side of the moon. The officer listened carefully, absorbing every detail. If they failed, the coordinated strike of Earth's weapons would falter, and the city and possibly the planet could fall. Admiral Rains stepped forward, his voice steady. "Hale, you and your companion will lead a small strike team. Your mission is critical. Take the fastest ships. Hit these nodes before the main attack begins. Do you understand? The officer saluted. Yes, sir. We will not fail. The maid placed a hand on his shoulder, her glowing eyes softening for a moment. We must move quickly. Timing is everything. 1 second too late and it will be too late. They left the command center and headed to the launch bay. Sleek fighters waited, their engines humming with power. The officers' team consisted of elite pilots, engineers, and tactical specialists, each chosen for speed and precision. But the officer and the maid were the core. They carried the knowledge that could turn the tide. As they prepared to launch, the officer glanced at the maid. Do you ever doubt we can do this? She shook her head. Doubt is a luxury we cannot afford. Focus on the mission, on survival, and on protecting the innocent. The rest will follow. The fighters shot into space. The planet below was ablaze, but from orbit, the war looked even more terrifying. Krivak ships filled the horizon, and green energy beams lit up the darkness. The fleet below launched into combat, firing missiles and lasers, but the enemy was everywhere, defending their positions. The first node was in low orbit, heavily guarded by Krivak drones. The officer's ship darted through the chaos, guided by the maid's sensors. She gave instructions in real time, telling them where to maneuver, when to fire, and which enemies to avoid. The drones attacked with precision, their energy weapons firing in patterns designed to overwhelm, but the maid moved with them, her armor glowing, her weapons slicing through the waves of attackers. The officer fired from the cockpit, using every skill he had learned. Every move mattered. They reached the first node. The officer launched a series of missiles as the maid synchronized her weapon's energy pulse. The node's shields flickered under the combined assault. Another strike, and it exploded into fragments that scattered across orbit. The team cheered briefly, but there was no time to celebrate. 2 more nodes remained, and the Krivak fleet had noticed the attack. Ships began converging on their location. The second node was farther away on a high orbit station. Enemy ships intercepted them, firing continuously. The officer and the maid coordinated perfectly. While the pilots maneuvered around attacks, the maid targeted weak points in the station's defenses. Explosions lit the void as the second node fell, its energy signature collapsing in a brilliant burst. Finally, the third node loomed, hidden on the dark side of the moon. It was the largest and most dangerous. As they approached, sensors detected a massive Krivak warship guarding the area. The officer's team froze for a second. This is it, the maid said softly. We cannot afford mistakes. They descended carefully, weaving around enemy fire and using the moon's shadow as cover. The Krivak warship fired relentlessly, but the maid predicted their movements, guiding the team to safety. When they reached the node, the officer and the maid struck together. She unleashed a concentrated energy blast while he targeted structural weak points with precise missiles. The node's shields overloaded, collapsing with a deafening pulse that shook their ships. The mission was complete. The 3 nodes were destroyed. The enemy network was disrupted. For the first time, humanity had a chance. As they returned to Earth fleet, the officer looked at the maid. We did it. We actually did it, she gave a small nod. This is only the beginning. The Krivak are powerful, but now your weapons can reach them. Now Earth can fight back. The officer smiled faintly, exhaustion written across his face. Then let's make them regret ever coming here. Below, the planet continued to burn, but for the first time, hope returned. Humanity had survived the first wave and had struck a hidden enemy where it hurt the most. Above all, the secret of the alien maid had proven true. She was not just a servant, but a guardian, a teacher, and the key to Earth's survival. And somewhere in the shadows of the galaxy, the Krivak noticed their losses. Their calculations would change, their strategy would adapt, and the final confrontation was yet to come. The battle for Earth was far from over, but humanity now had a chance to fight. The sky above Earth was no longer just a battlefield. It was a storm of fire, steel, and energy. The Krivak fleet, massive and organized, hung like dark clouds above the planet. Their ships moved with precision, their weapons glowing green as they rained destruction on cities below. Yet Earth fleet had not remained idle. From orbit, Earth's warships prepared their first coordinated strike. The attack plan guided by the intelligence the officer and the alien maid had provided. Every ship, every fighter, every weapon system was ready to act at once. The stakes were higher than ever. If this strike failed, humanity could face extinction. The officer stood in the bridge of his fighter, glancing at the maid beside him. She had returned to her sleek armor, the blue glow pulsing softly. Her weapon rested at her side, though her eyes never left the battle outside. "Are you ready?" he asked, gripping the controls tightly. "Ready," she replied. Her voice was calm, but there was fire in her eyes. "Remember, timing is everything. Wait for the signal, then strike. We cannot hesitate." The officer nodded, his mind racing. He had faced enemies before, but nothing compared to this. The Krivak were organized, intelligent, and relentless. Yet now humanity had a chance. They had information, strategy, and courage. The signal came from the flagship. The admiral's voice echoed across the fleet. "All units, prepare for coordinated strike." "On my mark, fire." The moment stretched. Seconds felt like hours. Then the command, "Now." Across the sky, thousands of missiles, energy beams, and fighter attacks launched simultaneously. The Krivak shields, designed to absorb endless attacks, began to falter under the combined assault. Explosions lit the darkness of space as the first ships fell. The officer maneuvered his fighter through the chaos, dodging energy beams and debris from shattered ships. The maid guided him, calling out instructions. "Left, now fire the concentrated pulse! Hold formation!" They struck in perfect synchrony. The shields of the Krivak vessels overloaded, sparking and cracking under the pressure. One by one, the enemy ships began to fall, tumbling through space in fire and metal. But the Krivak were not defeated yet. From the shadows of deep space, their true force emerged, a colossal command ship, massive beyond imagination. It glowed with an eerie green light, its surface bristling with weapons. This was the brain of the attack, the hive network that coordinated the entire fleet. The officer's heart pounded. That's the main ship?" The maid nodded. "Yes, we must destroy it. If it survives, the fleet will regroup and Earth will face even worse." Earth fleet's ships focused on the command vessel. Bombs, missiles, and energy pulses rained down. But the hive network adapted faster than anyone expected. Shields reformed, countermeasures activated, and waves of Krivak fighters swarmed the humans' ranks. The officer gritted his teeth. "We need another plan." The maid's glowing eyes scanned the enemy. "There is a weak point," she said. "A central core beneath the armor. I can guide you in, but you must reach it fast. Timing is everything." The officer nodded. "Then let's go." He led a small squadron with the maid at his side, weaving through enemy fire and debris. They avoided the main beams, dodged fighter attacks, and followed a path that only she could see through her sensors. Her knowledge of the Krivak technology was perfect. Every move calculated, every strike precise. Finally, they reached the heart of the command ship. The core glowed intensely, pulsing like a living heart. The officer fired missiles as the maid released a concentrated energy blast, synchronized to perfection. The core exploded in a brilliant burst of light. The shockwave rattled the surrounding ships, tearing through the fleet like a wave of destruction. Shields failed, ships fell, and the hive network collapsed. For the first time, silence fell over the battlefield. Green lights dimmed. Krivak fighters scattered. The remaining ships fled into deep space, leaving Earth battered but alive. The officer breathed heavily, his eyes scanning the remains of the battlefield. "We did it," he whispered. The maid looked at him, her glow softening. "This is only the first victory. The Krivak will return if we are not careful. But for now, humanity has survived." As they returned to Earth, news spread rapidly. Citizens who had watched the viral video now understood its true meaning. The title, "Watch Before Deleted," was no longer just a curiosity. It was a warning, a testament to courage, and a symbol of humanity's resilience. The officer stood before a crowd, the maid beside him. Children stared with wide eyes, adults murmured in awe, and soldiers saluted. For the first time in years, people felt hope. Humanity had faced an enemy that had seemed unstoppable, and they had fought back. The admiral approached, placing a hand on the officer's shoulder. "You and your companion saved countless lives today," he said. "The world will remember this." The officer nodded, glancing at the maid. "We were only part of it. Everyone who fought, everyone who stood their ground. They all did their part." The maid gave a small nod, her glowing eyes scanning the horizon. "Courage is not just a human trait," she said softly. "But today humanity has shown it is strong. Across the globe, people began to rebuild. Cities would take years to recover, but the spirit of Earth had not been broken. And in the shadows of space, other civilizations watching the battle understood that humanity was not weak. That Earth had allies, cunning, and a will to survive unlike any other species. In the days that followed, the video that had once circulated mysteriously became a symbol. Watch Before Deleted was shared widely, not as a warning of fear but as a story of courage, unity, and the power of preparation. The officer looked at the maid, who had returned to her simple form, her silver skin and calm presence once more. "Will they ever stop coming?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Perhaps. But humanity is ready now. You have learned to fight together, to understand your strengths. That is why I was sent, to prepare you, not just for survival but for victory." The officer nodded. He understood now. The invasion had tested them, pushed them to their limits, and revealed their true potential. Earth had survived not by chance but by courage, strategy, and unity. And somewhere in the galaxy, the story of the human officer and his alien companion began to spread. Other worlds would hear of Earth's courage. Other civilizations would remember that humans were not to be underestimated. The officer and the maid stood together, watching the sun rise over a recovering city. Smoke still rose from the ruins, but light broke through. Hope was alive, and humanity had proven itself worthy of survival among the stars. For now, the battle was over. But the legend of courage, of guardianship, and of the viral truth, Watch Before Deleted, would remain forever. Earth was not weak. Humanity had survived, and the galaxy had learned that sometimes the smallest flicker of hope could burn brighter than the strongest enemy.